Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second episode that we have done of this webinar series. What we're all about in this series is talking about how to implement ideas which have some kind of evidence base or a growing evidence base behind them. I'm Matt Bland. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Society of Evidence-Based Policing. I'm one of the co-hosts of this session, although hopefully you're not going to hear from me much. You're going to hear from the experts. My co-host is Suzanne Canaba-Nicole. I'll let her introduce herself. Or wave. Very nice.
What now?
And we've got,
okay, I can.
You do it when you're ready. You do it when you're ready.
Right. I'm Suzanne Canaba-Nicole from Police Science Doctor, and I work with the Society of Evidence-Based Policing on their media, webinars, and conferences. And I'm here to help out and make everything happen.
Fabulous job you do too. Today we're going to be talking about proactive targeting of sexual offenders, unwanted sexual behaviour in the nighttime economy. And I'm really delighted we've got three experts in that area who've got loads of experience in the actual doing of it. If you registered for this event, you will have seen the briefing sheet, which has got some of the background of the research behind it. And we'll have an article coming out next week from one of our speakers today, Tina Wallace, with a bit more detail behind some of the research that's emerging in this topic. We're not going to talk about the research today. We just want to hear about the implementation side. How do you do what is known as Project Vigilant? How does it work on the ground? What are some of the problems that you're going to need to overcome? In the first half of this session, I'm going to put questions to our three panel members. And in the second half, Suzanne is going to grill them with your questions. So we really encourage you to, whatever platform you're watching on, put questions in the chat. They feed through to us in live time. We'll collate them all, and then we will run through them in that second half. So this is a good opportunity to speak to our three panelists who have promised they will give candid answers to all of them. I'm just going to turn to the panelists now, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves before we get into the questions. Troy, if I could start with you, please.
Hello, my name is Troy Smith. I'm a Detective Inspector from Wiltshire Police. I work within the Violence Against Women and Girls Unit, or VORG, in Wiltshire Police. I'm the Senior Investigating Officer, or SIO, for Project Vigilant within our force. My background's in public protection, in domestic abuse and child abuse investigation and risk assessments, also counter-corruption. And I've been in the force for just over 20 years now.
That's great. Thanks, Troy. Tina.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Tina Wallace. I'm a Detective Inspector within Thames Valley Police. So I work in specialist operations as the Covert Operations Manager, 27 years in, and my entire career has been within proactive policing, normally targeting counter-terrorism, serious and organised crime, but I've turned my attention to violence against women and girls and the offender. So I'm the tactical lead for Project Vigilant within Thames Valley Police, and I work really closely with Tom.
Which is a great segue into Tom.
Good morning. Yeah, my name is Tom Barcham, I'm also an inspector at Thames Valley Police. Vigilant is not my day role. I'm a PACE inspector for my sins, but my passion and my background is proactive policing, tactical policing with firearms, international manhunt work that I did before this, and that led me to working with Tina and looking at predator-focused proactive policing, and that's how I've ended up in the Vigilant setup.
That's brilliant. You're all very welcome. We're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. I'm going to stay with you, Tom, on the first question, and then Troy, I'll come to you with the same one. Can you just explain to us a bit, in respect of your force, what Vigilant is and how it works? What's a typical deployment like?
So what Vigilant is, it's a proactive tactic around the identification of predatory behaviour, largely in the nighttime economy, but as the tactic has developed, that has spread to a wider field of most public environments. And the tactic itself, how it works, in its core, what we do is we have officers on all of our policing areas who are points of contact, and they will understand and they'll research their local nightlife and their local areas, and they will identify the areas of most concern that will build our what we call red nights. And these are events or evenings where we think we need a higher concentration of staff, and that's where we will deploy our team. The teams are drawn from officers from across the force, and they come across, largely speaking, two categories. We have behavioural detection officers and we have vigilant proactive officers. So the initial one is the behavioural detection officers, who are our plainclothes resources, and our vigilant proactive officers, who are our uniformed intervention resources. So they're the resources that we put to it, and they'll have a bronze commander, so a sergeant or a senior officer, senior PC, who runs that deployment. And once we've identified the night we want and the resources we want, we put the tactic into place. And what that looks like is, largely speaking, we'll have a briefing structure. So we'll have, every area will have its own vigilant briefing about people that are of interest to us, events that are going on that will cause, flux in the amount of people that will be there, etc., and areas of interest. That briefing will take place before the deployment. Everybody will be part of that briefing that's going to be part of that deployment, and that includes the officers, it includes the local supervisors, it includes CCTV operators, and any other resources that be allocated to it, including dog officers and also their dogs. Once everybody's briefed, the deployment will take place, and the behaviour detection officers will go out first, and they will get the lay of the land, and they will understand the dynamic of the crowd and what we call baseline behaviour, what people are doing, what is normal behaviour for that environment. And once they've established that, they'll start to look at what people are, how they're behaving, and that's where the behavioural indicators that we look at start coming into play. People are working against that baseline, people that are behaving in a way that is different to the norm and draws our attention. Once we've identified individuals that we want to speak to, that are displaying the behaviours that we train them to look for, they'll call forward the uniform intervention. Now, it's very important that those uniform intervention officers are not there before that point. So they are off scene, if you like. So they're away from the location. They're drawn forward and given a description of what's going on and a bit of a commentary as to what's playing out in front of them. They will then carry out that intervention with that individual, and they'll have a very robust conversation, and they'll talk to them and get as much information as they possibly can from that interaction. Excuse me. At that point, they'll find out everything they can about them, who they are, what their intentions are, what they're doing, and they'll discuss with them about their behaviours and about how they've been and what we about the appropriateness of what they've been doing. Obviously, if we identify offences, we'll progress the offences. If it results in just advice and that robust advice, that's exactly how it will be. But what we are doing is we're intervening and diverting a potential course of behaviour, and that's a key part of what we're doing. That aside, what happens at the end of the deployment? Everybody again that was involved in it, the whole deployment, comes back in, and we then debrief every single stop and every element of that stop, so that nothing is missed, and all that information is then collated and put together and then passed to our linchpin of the deployment, which is the sergeant, who then will review all the evidence and the information with the intelligence officer the following days, and will start to build a profile around those individuals, around the risk that they pose. And that is where the real magic happens, and we go on from there to do some management of those individuals as is appropriate. So that's how a deployment looks.
That's terrific. And sounds like a heck of a lot of work. My favourite bit about that process is probably that the dogs are included in the briefing. So I've got a really nice image of them. They're important. They're part of that. Troy, if you could just sort of pick up the baton there and perhaps just illustrate, like, if the consistencies in the process of your forces, are there any differences to what Vigilant is when it's in another location?
It is. I mean, first of all, you have to understand the differences between Thames Valley and Wiltshire Police, as Thames Valley is a vast force, really, with a lot more officers and staff in it than Wiltshire, which is, as a landmass is quite large, but, the populations are relatively small, and the officer numbers, therefore, we're really kind of underfunded and understaffed in Wiltshire. So it's difficult to implement new tactics like Vigilant. But what we've done with us is we've worked absolutely hand in glove with Thames Valley, in that we've implemented all of their training, we've implemented their deployment techniques, and the whole kind of system really down to debrief forms that the officers complete when they complete an intervention. We've got all that enforced and we've taken it all on. We work really closely with Thames Valley. We co-deployed with Thames Valley on numerous occasions, and we will be again next month. But what we've done in Wiltshire is I've kind of been given free rein to take the tactic where I kind of see fit and where it fits in with Wiltshire, and that's really testament to Thames Valley to allowing that to kind of roll out into other forces. They're not precious about anything to do with the tactic, and they're keen to hear back about the way it's expanding. So in my force, I've kind of, when we rolled it out, we just did it during the daytime, so we called it Vigilant Day, which I've now sort of redubbed Engage and Enforce, because it's a very overt, completely overt response, and it's more of a broken windows approach originally to targeting any kind of behaviour that would make a woman and girl feel unsafe, because I'm part of the Violence Against Women and Girls, or VORG team. That's very much my kind of focus. So we try and push the fact that it's not just kind of cardboard cutout policing. You're not just standing on a street corner being visible. It's an active deployment where we really encourage our officers to kind of hone their policing skills and develop their instincts in spotting behaviour that's outside the baseline. So it's very similar. It's completely the same risk factors, and we're still looking for behaviours that are outside the baseline, but we did it during the day. But we've expanded it. Obviously, we deploy in the nighttime economy. That's our main area that we deploy. Smaller deployments with less resources. We don't have things like dogs or decoys or any other of those types of assets available to us. But what we do is we Thames Valley, and they have lent us their assets previously. It's really a push that we've done for overt policing, with a proactive sort of side bit to it, but also what we're doing is I've taken it out into what I call vigilant communities. So I've gone out and trained or given inputs to people like, education sector, colleges, people with safeguarding or enforcement responsibilities, and train them in spotting predatory behaviour in the community, so they can act as a link between the public and the police, so that we can drive up intelligence around risk individuals that may be clattering around in our communities that we don't necessarily know about. And it's all about, my focus is 100% on prevention, because once somebody becomes a victim, we're already too late, and we can investigate it to the nth degree, but it's already, we're too late. So it's just trying to remind our officers and then get out to the communities is that don't leave it too late. We need the intelligence in, we need the information, and officers need to make interventions quickly as they possibly can. So we've taken it almost in the, like I said, in the community's direction, whilst retaining all the core principles that Thames Valley taught us a couple of years ago when Tina came to Swindon to train our trainers in the vigilant tactic.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Thanks, Troy. Tina, I'm gonna go straight past all of the results and what you get from it. You've obviously been to other forces and you've talked to them about setting that from scratch, but I want to imagine that you've got that responsibility yourself. What are you going to do? How do you go about setting this up from scratch? What are the absolutely essential things to get right?
I think if I was starting afresh, going into a new force, my priority would be to embed vigilant within the force's existing structures, because it's like Troy said, we're all very different. I mean, TVP, we've been doing this now for 5 years, and we were gifted an awful lot of money to start with by the Home Office back in 2019. So we had the luxury of being able to throw resources at it. We don't have that now, but we appreciate as well. So some forces probably look at what we've done and think, well, we haven't got that money. So I try and start it as just to embed it in the existing structure, but also say to them, you don't have to do what we do. But it's understanding the local problem. So it's the data analysis within the nighttime economy, what are the crime trends, where are the areas where we know that people feel unsafe. But we also know that this is enormously underreported. So how do we know where people are feeling unsafe? Well, we've got to engage with our partners in the nighttime economy as well, with venue staff. Have a look around as well. Go speaking to people if we need to, speak to members of the public. But I think we're not using our street angels or our street pastors, our volunteers in that sector. We need to be using them more, because they are just a rich source of intelligence. They can tell us where people feel unsafe. And then we look at those gaps, and then look at what other intelligence do we have with some of the individuals. Some of the repeat offenders, are they going out into the nighttime economy? So once we've got that, it's securing that internal buy-in. Now, we've gone in from the ground up, where we were using good old-fashioned, what we call thief takers, police officers who really want to go out there and be extremely proactive. Some people join the job to be proactive. Others join because they want to be roads policing or firearms or detectives. But there are a core group of officers and staff out there, CCTV operators. They want to be proactive, but there's no role profile for them and there's no training. So we've found a way to train that to help them join the dots. So it's getting buy-in at the grassroots level, but also from middle management and senior management, because that's where the funding's going to come in. Because we're asking people to go out into the nighttime economy, plain clothes, uniform intervention, it's resource intensive. And if there's a public order event, you're going to want to draw from those resources. So we've got to get that buy-in from there. And then it's building this operational plan that fits, or the operational model that fits that specific area. For instance, like Wiltshire, for instance, they could not probably put 16 officers out on what we refer to as the red night. So the red night is generally end of the month pay weekend, or it's leading into Christmas or a freshers week or a big social event within that area. We could afford to put more officers to it. But another force might only be able to put 4 officers, or even, the basic is 4 officers, 2 plain clothes, 2 uniform. So it's looking at that really, and then providing that model that fits that particular force. But for me, it's about that buy-in. You need someone, a senior leader and also a middle manager. It's normally the superintendent, the chief inspector, to say, yes, you can go and do that. And all you need is one deployment to start with, and then you need one stop. And then the intelligence from that one stop then actually will more than likely prove its worth. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. You always answer my questions.
Thank you.
Tom, I want to know, I want a horror story. What has gone wrong with deployments? Because stuff always goes wrong. But, I'm trying to get out here what people need to anticipate they're going to be doing this.
We had a few, I've got to say. In the early days, there was quite our biggest one, I think, to start with, is that people, when they bought into the tactic, we got to the point they said, right, we stopped them. What do we do now? And we lost some traction there, because we didn't have a clearly defined framework about what we did once we had intervened and how we managed that risk, and then how we discussed it internally as well. So I think, and I'm sure Tina will agree, that quite early on, not quite early, over the last few years, we did lose that traction internally. We then regained it by being very clear about what our framework was, and decided on that, and getting that buy-in again, talking to other departments, using other departments' processes like the rape and serious sexual offences review structure. We bought into that, and we got a seat at the table. Really, that was one of the big steps that we took to rectify that, and also the training as well, making sure that the training was consistent. So we had a number of training operations where we trained people in a particular way, but that wasn't consistent across the force. So we stripped it back, and we redesigned a training package which was for everybody. So we had, again, that baseline analogy of using everybody has the same level of knowledge to start with, so we can build on that. So that was definitely, I'll say, training is probably the biggest one, the biggest, not mistake, but the biggest area that we needed to improve upon quite early on. So anybody that wanted to do this tactic, you've got to get your training right, and you've got to understand your resourcing picture as well as the buy-in.
And so just tell us a little bit about what the training looks like, who's delivering that, Tom, and how long is it taking? Because obviously the answer to every new initiative is let's do some training. So I imagine that's quite hard to sort of penetrate that.
So, yeah, no, do you know what we did? We listened to what's going on around us. We listened to cops going, the new generation, they don't get it, they don't listen. We came at that from the wrong. We in policing, I think, have come at that from the wrong direction. The new generation, Gen Z, they listen to things. They're bi-directional. They can take in lots of sources of information at once that I certainly can't. So we adapted the training style to accommodate newer officers. Instead of sidelining them and saying, well, you're not playing our game, we're not going to train you properly. We've changed it. We've changed it around. We're focusing on them, the newer officers, the people that are going to be taking this forward. So we've done away with the traditional point and click, overhead projector style of training, and we created a fly on the wall documentary style package. So now when you do the training, it's about a 2-hour session, initial session, and you come in. Yes, there is PowerPoints, of course, but it's interactive. It's all about the engagement of the team that's taking the training, and you get a half-hour video, which is like watching an episode of 24 Hours in Police Custody, and it's great. And that takes you through the entire process, and it shows you what you need to be doing. And it's got into parts of it where we use specialists. We use officer from the serious crime analysis section at the NCA, who explains in detail why we're doing what we're doing, and also what the predators are thinking in order to put themselves doing what they're doing, so we can understand it better. And it's always delivered by subject matter experts. So it's not delivered by dry individuals who don't really know what it is. It's delivered by people who are passionate about it and can answer questions about it and can actually talk about it and help develop what we're doing as we're doing it. And that gets the engagement. And once you've got engagement, people, there's no holding you back. And then we back that up with another new way of doing training, which is podcasts. So we started to deliver podcasts. Why should training be in that formal environment of a Friday morning, third Friday of the month? You spend 2 hours in a training room. We're talking about podcasts officers can listen to whilst they're patrolling, whilst they're on the way to work, whilst they're in the gym, wherever they want to. A 10-minute hit, but again, subject matter experts and relevant input. So that's what we've done. That's how the training looks.
You must be getting some pushback on that, because podcasts, you talk about Generation Z. A lot of officers aren't Gen Z. What are they making? Are you getting any resistance?
Well, no. No, we've got senior officers, senior PCs, officers who are very experienced that perhaps have not engaged with this because they felt it wasn't for them. But what we're finding is they're saying, well, actually, I've got a lot I can bring to the table here. I've got a lot of experience, and I see how you're delivering it. And we've had senior PCs that are coming to us and saying, I've got something for this. Can I get involved in the training? Can I help deliver the training? So actually, people are getting on board, or they're getting left behind. I think people realise that as well, and we haven't had to push that agenda at all. People are seeing it. The results speak for themselves.
That's really interesting. Thank you. So, Troy, I just want to pick up, because you said something really interesting about you've been doing it in the daytime and sort of gone on to the nighttime, which is obviously quite different. I'm imagining quite different community that it's impacting on. How have the community reacted to it?
Overwhelmingly positive. I haven't had any negative at all. If I've ever had any negative off of any type of community, it's usually skepticism around this is going to be another police knee-jerk reaction to violence against women and girls and Wayne Couzens and all that thing that happened a few years ago. But they're so used to seeing police tactics come and go, and the police do something that's fashionable this week, and then by next month, it's down the road and you're doing something completely different. It's just been convincing people that one, violence against women and girls is here to stay, and it's not just another fad. And two, that Vigilant really works, but it's having a belief of the core principles of the tactic. And it's the belief of the people that actually take it to the communities that's really kind of pushing it forward. So our passion in the delivery of the news about Vigilant is really key, I think. And certainly when we've trained people like the Royal Military Police, we've been into His Majesty's Immigration Service, and we've trained those officers. I go to the pub watches very regularly, and I share information around spiking, around sexual predatory behaviour and all sorts of things. And it's really, you have to meet people halfway and really engage with them and show through your, through the passion and the way you speak about a tactic to convince them that it's here to stay, and it's really important. And it's helping people understand sexual offending, because as a society, we're not ready to cope with what sexual offending is. If you ask somebody what a rapist is on the street, they'd probably say it's a dirty old man in a Mac who's waiting in the bush to jump out on people and drag them into an alleyway. That's not the case. What we do know is that, you know, with a lot of sexual offending, particularly in the nighttime economy, it's all targeting vulnerability. It's got nothing to do with passion or libido. It's all to do with power, authority, and control. And it's forearming people with the knowledge that people who want to predate on vulnerable people will use grooming techniques to do that. And that's, you know, if you've ever heard of someone called Dr. Patrick Tidmarsh, who works with Operation Soteria through the Home Office, he cites very clearly about the use of grooming in all sexual offending, unless the person's just 100% intent on violence. Grooming will always be an element of that. So I take that out to the general public, and I bring it up, and I bring up grooming, and I bring up some of the things that maybe a few years ago we just thought we can't tell that to communities, that because they'll think, you know, they'll be scared, it will drive up fear of crime. We found it's had the opposite. It's had the opposite, to be honest with you. And what we've got is licensees, door staff, educators, safeguarders, support agencies are actually engaging with us much better, because they trust us, because they know, they feel that we're on their side and we're really looking to prevent those victims. It's not about you know, getting out and arresting people and waiting for offences to happen, because by the time a victim is a victim, we're too late. And I'm really emotive in the language that I use, and it was picked up on a recent press piece that I did that used really emotive language. You want to make the streets a hostile environment for sexual predators. So it's really emotive. It has to be, because it gets people's attention and imagination. It means that we mean it, and it's not when, you know, in 10 minutes time we're not going to be going down looking at something completely different. Vigilant is here to stay, because the practitioners, the people who train it, and that all started in Thames Valley, moved across, and it's spreading across the country. The people who actually police Vigilant and the communities that are engaged in that are 100% committed to it, and they believe in the tactic. If you look at the expansion of it within Wiltshire, we've gone through those different enforcement agencies, but also to work closer with, say, Nelson Trust in Wiltshire, that support sex workers, on street sex workers. Really difficult to reach group, and historically there's a lot of distrust, because we used to persecute sex workers and see them as offenders, whereas rather than seeing them as what they are, which is really vulnerable people who are, you know, 9 times out of 10 are going to have horrendous issues with substance abuse and mental health and things. We move in more to support them, so we target the people who are coming into those districts where sex workers work and targeting them. So we are kind of almost looking after the sex workers. We don't support them in their sex work. What we do is we basically target the creeps and the harm causes that come in, and you know, and it makes everybody else unsafe as well when you've got curb crawlers going around any area. So yeah,
Can I ask you, Troy, about the sex work? No, at all. I just want to. I'm interested in, you know, particularly where you talk about sex workers being vulnerable people there. Does Vigilant interfere with their work?
No, because what we do is we co-deploy with Nelson Trust, who put out a welfare wagon, particular nights of the week. So we made sure that we coincided with the night they have the welfare wagon out, so the staff there and the key workers could actually spread the message amongst the ladies that are on the street on that night. Plus, we employ the use of our adult sexual exploitation workers as well, because they're people that the women there sort of know and trust reasonably. And we're open to it, and we included the Nelson Trust support workers, one of whom is a previous offender with us, but is now reformed, and she's wonderful. And she actually came into our briefing and spoke through the briefing with us to give our officers a little bit of an idea of what life's like for a sex worker. And you do get some negative reactions, but we got some really good results, because what we were doing, we were sharing intelligence live time about particular people that were in and out of that area of Swindon. and it was nothing but positive. And it's been noticeable, the build of trust between us, in the fact that our intel now coming in from sex workers is picked up significantly in force, and the attitude and the reaction to police from our sex workers, although it's always going to be frosty, there's a better element of trust there between us and that community.
Thanks, Troy. That's great. There's loads to unpack there, and the sort of all of you working in it clearly really behind this as a tactic, but money's really tight in policing at the minute, and there's loads of competing priorities. That's a record that's been played a lot of times. Tina, is vigilance sustainable? Because clearly it's quite resource intensive, accepting you can tailor it to your resources to a certain extent. What are the threats and the challenges for the future of vigilance?
It's like you say, it's funding and resources. So we have been so fortunate through the Home Office, where we've got nothing but praise for the Home Office. They gave us an awful lot of money to start with, and then our PCC, Mr. Barber, has been exceptional. So every year he empties his pockets for us, and he gives us more funding so that we can put deployments on as part of overtime, which has been really good, because most of our officers are really keen to come out there. I mean, some of them have rather reallocate their rest days rather than come out and do rest day working. So that's sort of a testament really to how good this is, because police officers love to do it. But that money just dries up and we can't always rely on it. So we've been working towards this business as usual approach, because it's like Tom said, we've trained everyone how to do this. It's basic criminal behavioural detection. And actually, the behaviours are replicated across different crime types. So if I was asked to ask the member of the public, let's consider a series of robberies where old age pensioners are drawing their money from an ATM, a cash machine, and then there's a group targeting that old age pensioner. The same sort of behaviours will be applied to the old age pensioner, the victim, than they are as well in the nighttime economy. But for some reason, we don't want to look through the lens of the offender when it's sexual violence. And it's like Troy says, these men are not monsters. These are regular human beings. These are regular men that have regular lives. They've just got this warped view of sexual violence. But the only way that we're going to stop that is at the moment is boots on the ground to identify how rape and sexual offences manifest. And it's manifested through these behavioural cues, because a rape doesn't just happen. We have victims that will say it came out of the blue. It was just that she, or the victim, a male could be, just wasn't aware of it. They didn't see the behavioural cues, or they didn't hear anything. That rapist or sex offender will have left some behavioural cues through his activity, through what he's doing. That's what we're training our officers to spot. And we don't have that many officers. We know publicly that officers are leaving in droves. So one of the things for me, and probably come on to if we get time, is how can we teach technology what to look for? Because we've done a very short trial with 2 companies outside of policing. Can we detect predatory offending on buses and trains? Yes, we believe we can. So we've done this short trial. We had amazing success. So now we've asked for a little bit of funding. Well, it's a little more than a little bit of funding to conduct this trial for 12 months so we can teach technology what to look for. And that's not facial recognition. This is GDPR compliant technology that everyone subscribes to when you're out in public, because that will then enable us to understand the depth and scale of this. And once we understand the depth and scale, we can then prioritise our resources. So one of the big threats really is funding, it's resources, leadership changes. Our biggest advocate in Thames Valley Police, she's now Katie Barrow-Grint. She's DCC, she's the Deputy Chief Constable in Gloucester. So we're absolutely devastated she's gone. She was the biggest advocate for Project Vigilant. And I'm not saying that we don't have advocates for Project Vigilant, but she was an enormous voice. But different leaders have different priorities. So that's a big thing as well, is keeping Project Vigilant in their mind and at the forefront of their mind. But they've got competing demands as well. It's the corporate memory for me about proactive policing. We spent years moving away from it, and I still don't really understand why. So we kind of lost that corporate memory. So it's reminding that we know that crime prevention it's tricky to measure. It's trickier to measure than reactive policing, but actually you can just measure it in different ways. So it's that corporate memory. It's the training fatigue of officers as well. We're asking them to go out in the nighttime economy, so that's predominantly late shifts, it's long hours. And also if if they're required elsewhere because of demands, resourcing demands, they can lose that skill set quite quickly. So we have to maintain their continuous professional development, CPD. Public perception, maintaining that legitimacy is absolutely crucial, but that goes hand in hand with communication strategy. So I've been quite vocal about hours in force. We've got some challenges because our comms strategy does not reflect our proactive nature of doing what we do. I mean, we're extremely proactive and we're extremely dynamic, and our comms has to match that. And I don't think it matches it. And there's a number of reasons for that. And it's about probably how it's perceived by the public. But if we don't tell the public what we're doing, how can we then improve that trust and confidence? Also, we need to be able to tell the victims and reassure them we're out there, we're trying to protect you, we're not always going to get it right. But more importantly, it's the offenders. They need to know that we're out there as well. So we need to send them a message. It's like, if you're going to come out there and you're going to be predatory, we're going to be looking for you. So that comm strategy, if we made tweaks on that and made it more proactive, we'd actually hit 3 big key areas there of trust and confidence, policing. It will get better. It will be sending a message to our officers that we're keen on this, and it will also be telling the predators that we're out there looking for them.
What's going on there then? What's the blocker for comms? Is that just a comms issue between Vigilant and the comms team, or is there a conscious sort of reluctance to be overt in communications around what you're doing here?
I think it's a conscious reluctance to be overt. And I think one of the reasons came about from about 5 years ago, where we were quite proactive. And then there was an investigative journalist that really started to target what we were doing. And then he then figured out when we were deploying versus when we were not deploying, and then would highlight the times when there was potentially a rape or sexual assault. So I get that there's some challenges with that. But I think, again, we have to look across all the other forces that are doing Project Vigilant, because we are not the pinnacle of excellence in this. We just started it off and then have been working on it for so long. But there are some fantastic comm strategies out there. So Gloucester, they've done some great work with TikTok. So I think a bit like what we're doing in the Project Vigilant space, we're constantly learning. I mean, with what Troy's doing in Wiltshire is wonderful. It's the same. Avon and Somerset are doing some great work, as is Hertfordshire, Leicestershire, all of these forces that we're learning from. Our comms teams, I think, should be doing that as well. But I personally think it should be centrally led, and we should market it properly. So, because this is we're trying to tell the public what we're doing. We're trying to improve trust and confidence with the victims, but it's also got to be that offender focused as well. So that's 3 key messages. That's going to take some doing to get that done, but I think it's achievable.
No, great. That's great. I'm going to start to get towards the end of my questions, because I know we've got some questions coming in, and I want to keep encouraging people who are watching to put them in. But I just want to ask a couple of brief things before we go to that last bit. Troy, can I just ask you, just zero in on the risk assessment process? And this might be part of the training, so forgive me if it's my naivety around it. How are you ensuring that risk assessment process that's going on once you've encountered people is consistent across the board?
It's a particularly difficult one, certainly for Wiltshire. I think Thames Valley have had a lot more success and have a stricter process in place. I mean, we've considered all different types of models of risk assessment, and I've spoken with National Crime Agency a couple of times on it now about what do you think would be the appropriate, would Cambridge Harm Index be an appropriate system? And it's quite difficult, to be honest with you, because I've almost been a one-man band with Vigilant and Wiltshire for so long. I tend to just kind of do what I think is best with things and use my kind of experience in this field to help risk assess. So basically what we've done in Wiltshire is we've separated out 2 systems of risk assessment. At the end of our risk assessment is something what we call the harm reduction meeting, which is all sexual offences or sexual offenders. It's all suspect focused. So any kind of repeat offender that's currently not under management of our offender managers, isn't currently in the court process or under investigation for sexual offence, so isn't subject of any bail conditions, will go to the harm reduction meeting, which is it will be multi-agency eventually once we get it up and running, because we've only had a couple of meetings so far. But what we want to do is include our partners in, say, probation, immigration, and other people, to risk assess these individuals based on a Cambridge harm index score, but just add that little bit of almost run it like a mini a MARAC, a multi-agency risk assessment conference that's traditionally within policing, is applied to domestic abuse, but almost run that like a mini MARAC or a MATAC, and just and do the risk assessments from there. So we'll have a base score and then apply some sort of other intelligence and information from partners to come out with where we think the risk level sits. Prior to that, what I'll do is I'll use a risk assessment score that I got from Thames Valley, from A+ down to D. But again, that's not, there's no science applied to that, unfortunately. That's my view as the SIO, Senior Investigating Officer for the tactic. I will view that individual, look into their past, look to see what their static and dynamic risk factors are involved in that individual, look at their previous offending, and see what the risk is. And then if I rate them at a particular level, what I'll do is I'll submit them to the harm reduction meeting. But I do send out my own taskings to neighbourhood policing teams who work quite closely with me, to ensure that we can have sort of work afterwards done to home visits, those types of things. But as far as a scientific standard of risk assessment, it's done on experience and professional opinion within Wiltshire, largely, with a little bit of the Cambridge Harm Index running underneath. It's a work in progress, to be honest with you, Matt.
Yeah, isn't everything, but that's a really great description. Thank you. Right, I'm going to round this out, and then Suzanne, I'm going to come to you after this last one, so we can go to audience questions. Tina, I'm going to finish my section with you and just ask you what's next for Vigilant.
Oh, there's so much that we're doing. We've identified so many gaps, so many gaps in our processes. Tom can talk very briefly. Tom and I we did some training about 18 months ago in Oxford, and some young police officers were like, well, we don't have a power of search associated with this because we're relying on Section 1 of PACE, Police and Criminal Evidence Act, or Section 23 of the Misuse of Drugs Act. That's not appropriate. This is not a stop and search exercise, but there are some individuals that are taking items out with them. Tom, I wasn't sure if you wanted to come in at this point, because this is predominantly your work that you've been dealing with the power of search and the going equipped.
Yeah, happy to. As Tina says, we sat there with some officers in a briefing, as we discussed at the beginning of the session, and they asked that question: what do we do with them when we've got them? If we don't have an obvious route to progress it, what do we do? And then in the back of the room, somebody said, "Oh, ways and means policing. Find a way to get in the pockets," and that did not resonate with us. That's not professional. It's not the way policing is going. That's not what we want. So we thought around the subject. Well, what can we do? There is no offence of going equipped. You can have any number of items in your possession that are perfectly lawful, but you put them in the context of sexual predatory behaviour. That's incredibly concerning, incredibly worrying. I could follow a lady around a town centre in the evening, and I could have handcuffs in my pocket. My intentions could be quite clear, but on the face of it, there's not a lot the police can do. There's I can't be seized, I can't be arrested for that. So we started to look at it, and we put together for a new offence. So we looked at the current legislation under the Sexual Offences Act, etc., and we've come up with a new offence of going equipped to commit a sexual offence and associated power of search. So we evidenced it and we presented it to. We were lucky at last summer at Cambridge at your evidence-based policing conference last summer. We spoke with a Vorg legislator who also been on your programme, a very opportune meeting, and we presented it to him, and he very much took to it. And we were invited to the Home Office to present it again, And we did that, and that's now in train. That's now in traction. We're looking like, I mean, it's not, nothing is confirmed yet, of course, but we're looking like at some point we'll be getting a power search with seizure options to look for items that people have them to go equipped to commit these sexual offences. It was it's referred to within policing as a rape kit, horrific terminology, but that is exactly what we're looking for from people. And at some point, an offence of going equipped to commit a sexual offence. So that's a huge sort of like step forward to changing it. We weren't happy with that idea of, well, this doesn't, we don't do this kind of work because there is nothing to support it. There's no law to stop you doing what you're doing. We weren't happy with the status quo. We pushed it up. We changed it. We've gone, well, let's change the law then.
Well done for getting that done. That can't have been easy. Making such changes is something that we need, but obviously a very massive mountain, I think. We're going to move now to the questions from the audience. So we've got a live audience watching on YouTube and LinkedIn. The first question that came in, and you guys decide who wants to pick that up, is from Dixie Dean. And she's asking, are you going to cover the next day subsequent interventions by the sergeant and analyst? Who would like to take that?
I could do that. So our sergeant and analyst are key to this. These are the ones, the unsung heroes in all of this, really. So we recruited them. So it was 6 months after the project had first began, and it was part of an academic evaluation from Brighton University that said you need your own intelligence officer and sergeant. And they've been on secondment, really. So we've still not really confirmed that they're permanent posts. So what will happen is, like Tom had said earlier on, the debrief form will come in to our sergeant and intelligence officer. And then what we're looking at now is delving a little bit deeper on the profile of the individual. So we're concerned with how he came to our attention. What were those behaviours? What were any external factors that were present? So was he drunk? Was he had he taken drugs? Was there any personal circumstances such as ending of a relationship? Not that they'll account for his behaviour or excuse his behaviour, but it'll account for why he behaved the way he did. And then we're looking at his previous criminal career history, because we know that's a good indication of predicting future offending. So based on all of that, we're looking at this risk that the individuals pose. Fortunately, we don't have that many A+. So the A+ are at imminent risk of sexual offending. And then we have A's that are a strong likelihood of sexual offending. And then it goes down the list. So you've got B, C, and then no risk. So we've then got this suite of options. So it's Tom's phrase, it's a suite of options, because it's not a one size fits all. It's an individual needs-based assessment based on where they are within that risk matrix or that risk category. So the C's, for instance, these are men that they've come to our attention. We don't really know how harmful these men pose, but they've got some indicators of potential having this mindset towards being a sexual predator. Well, we can refer them into our charity. We work closely with the charity Circle Southeast. And I have to admit that challenged my preconceived notion of sex offenders, because I thought they can't be helped. They absolutely can. Some of these men can. And we've had enormous success of putting men into Circle Southeast. And we've had some very good interventions where we've helped divert some of these men from that pathway. And then we're trying different routes of sexual risk orders. There's so much sexual harm prevention orders, where one individual, it's touching on what Troy said earlier on about sex workers. So the sex workers provide some very good, rich intelligence for us. So much so there was one individual, they told us about him, extremely concerning. He came straight into us as an A, which is strong likelihood of sex offending. So we actually did some covert tactical measures on him, which was pretty much instant, and it worked, and he was in prison, which is where he belonged. And then when he come out, we had the sexual harm prevention order. So all of these different ways of treating these individuals, it could be education, it could be simply a very robust conversation, or it could be traditional conventional criminal justice routes or covert tactics, depending on really who the individual is and what we think we can do with that. Hope that answers the question.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The next question comes from Becky White. Is there any protocol for engaging with the members of the public who are on the receiving end of the behaviors? Who would like that?
I can come in on that one if you like. I mean, the key principle is with this is a suspect focus. and traditionally we've kind of victim blamed. Well, traditionally, and we still do have victim blaming attitudes within the police and within society. We want to move sharply away from those, because everybody has a right to go out in the nighttime economy or daytime economy, wherever it is, and enjoy the public spaces in our country. So what we don't want to do is if somebody is quite happily going about their business and is unknowingly being, say, tracked or watched by a potential predator, we don't need to interrupt that person's day and say, by the way, you were being followed, and then drive up their fear of crime. We will engage where there's a safeguarding need, but certainly on a proactive deployment, we have to be careful about approaching females in the nighttime economy, particularly with plainclothes officers, because of what happened with Wayne Couzens. There is some fear and mistrust of police, particularly with plainclothes work. So what we do is we avoid any contact with victims or potential victims by our plainclothes officers, and that protects the tactic as well, to be honest with you. We will engage where there's a safeguarding concern. Obviously, if there's a crime committed, then obviously we will intervene and speak with that person. But we try to not engage with people in the nighttime economy and allow them to get on with their evenings, because the bar is relatively low as far as our interventions. We will go in on very early, and the reason for that is we want to prevent victims being victims. So 9 times out of 10, certainly with our Wiltshire deployments, is we'll go in before our potential victim even knows that they're being targeted. Our liaison with sort of potential victims or the public is through our sort of communities work as well, helping them perhaps spot the signs. But we like I said, we try not to intervene with the victim. We allow the victim to go about their lawful business, and it's 100% on targeting and getting those suspects.
Great, thank you. Next question comes from Nicholas Sinclair. How can I get involved in providing training? I'm a therapist, but this work is key for me, teaching women and girls about red flags.
I'm quite happy with that one. That's very interesting, actually. We have done quite a significant number of training sessions with partners, and partners is a wide concept. So we've done it with door staff, we do it with street guardians, street angels. We've also gone into schools. We've talked to the multi-agency services hub in local councils. So we are open to discussing this with anybody. We do something called bystander training, and the concept of bystander training is not only does it equip you with the knowledge for what to look for, that you can then also go on to train within your environment, but it empowers. We're finding that this is empowering people to stand up. We're asking people to effectively stand up in the wider community. We're asking people quite publicly, the government involved in this. You see this in numerous press reels about saying, if you see it, call it out, and we very much support that where it's safe to do so. So there's a growing, should we say, database, and there's a growing, not database is the wrong word, a growing number of agencies and partners that we are talking about this work too. So there is an opportunity for bystander training that we can certainly have a conversation with an individual or organisation, and where it's relevant, we can help with delivering that.
May I suggest that maybe we contact Matt on coo@sebp.police.uk if you want to get involved in some way, and I'm sure Matt will be happy to pass on to any interested parties here. Is that okay, Matt? I just gave out your email address here. Yeah. Okay, next question comes from, I might get your name very wrong, excuse me, Cheche Desai. And this question is for Tina. You talked about offender behavioral cues in sexual violence. Can you talk more about them? What are the most common ones? Are these linguistic cues you can get from talking to them?
The linguistic cues will come once our officers have those interventions, and that's a robust conversation. And this is where we teach our officers how to talk to people and how to pick up on what somebody's saying. But it's the behavioural cues. This is the magical aspect of what we do and criminal behavioural detection. And it's something that police officers are not taught. We've never been taught. I'm a surveillance officer. I have been for 27 years. No one's ever taught me what to look for. That's just come from my the fact I'm a professional observer, and I look at people and think that behaviour is not right. But when we first started doing this, we identified a range of behaviours. So stalking and harassing, persistence, and that's persistently pestering a particular female or pestering lots of different females, unwanted attention, invading personal space, this overbearing, aggressive type behavior where guy approaches girl and he's got his arm around her and she looks vulnerable. And when I say looks vulnerable, it could be she's unsteady on her feet through alcohol. We're not looking at her, we're not focusing on her, we're focusing on how he's behaving towards her. Unwanted touching, sexualized, misogynistic, quite lewd comments. And I'm adding loitering to this behaviour now as well, because I know there's a few academics have sort of almost laughed me at the room, but loitering is a criminal behaviour. Criminals will normally loiter in an area, whether or not they're just about to go and commit a burglary, they're having a look at the particular area, case in the area. It's the same for drug dealers when they're just about to buy drugs, sell drugs, same for someone who's just about to go and commit a robbery. In the nighttime economy, we see lots of men, they come into the nighttime economy and we're there all night. We're not doing the traditional 15-minute hotspot patrols. We're there all night. So we see men, they're not going into bars and clubs. They're just moving around the nighttime economy. They hang around near late night eateries, near taxi ranks in dark doorways. And as a female on her own goes to get into a taxi, he emerges to try and get in the taxi with her. We're seeing men stood at bus stops in the nighttime economy, seemingly fixated on a particular individual. Not once have they looked in the direction of where the bus is coming. So loitering is not indicative of a sexual offence. We're saying to our officers, look at that. Why is he hanging around loitering? And then you pair that with one of the other behaviours of the unwanted attention, persistence, the sexualised comments, the unwanted touching. So those range of behaviours we've identified within the first 6 weeks of Project Vigilant back in 2019, and we've seen that is prevalent across all of this, and every single force that does it, we all see exactly the same behaviours, which is basic criminal behavioural detection replicated across a number of different crime types.
Okay, great. We've got 4 more questions and about 3 minutes. Another one by Nicholas Sinclair. The information gathered on individuals, how is that used? Barrier for women and girls reporting, first offense, not taken seriously, more risk if info is on file, helpful. I can actually show that, I forgot. Who wants to take that briefly?
I can do that as well, unless, Tom, you want to?
No, I was still reading the question.
There's a barrier to reporting, and I think this comes back down to the comm strategy. I mean, even in our own force, if a woman rings up the police to report that she's been stalked, harassed, followed home, someone's made lewd sexualized comments, invaded her personal space, we can record that one of 3 different ways. Now, one of the things that I wrote in my thesis, and it's something I keep speaking to the Home Office about, is we need a single system to make it easier for women to report. Not necessarily that we can do everything about it. We have no clue the depth and scale of this problem, but we know it's an enormous problem. So give women a mechanism to report, and men, because men are victims as well in here. But predominantly we see women are the victims, men are the offenders. So we need to find out how bad the problem is and whether or not we are absolutely correct in that we've got this range of behaviours. Are there any more? So, and we also need to encourage women to report as well, and we need to give them this system. But we do that through our comm strategies. But we absolutely take every single one of our behaviours seriously, because we will get women approach us in the nighttime economy to our uniform officers and say, this has just happened. We absolutely take that seriously and we'll deal with it straight away. So hopefully she'll walk away and know that we're intervening, and then that will give her some sense of trust and confidence in us. But this is sort of like, we're still at the early stages. We're 5 years in, and we're starting to make real traction here, but with other forces that are wanting to do this. But we need this collective response. We first need to find a single system for reporting this. And we've got this dashboard. I love a little bit of data. This is Matt's fault. I wasn't interested in data before I started Cambridge, but it's absolutely, this dashboard will allow any force that collects the same data as us to add to this Power BI dashboard, and we could start to see how bad the problem is and where the problem is across the country. I think that's a start.
Thank you. I think what we'll do now, there's 3 more questions that have been submitted. You can, where you're watching this, submit more questions. If I may encourage the panel to maybe just go into LinkedIn or YouTube and maybe provide answers in your own time when you can. I'm going to hand over to Matt now to take us through the ending, and we're going to try and leave on time.
Yeah, it's 20 seconds for me to close it out, but that's great because we've got some really good content there, I think, from everybody on Vigilant. I just want to say a huge thank you to our panel members, Troy, Tina, and Tom, for giving up their valuable time to talk about Vigilant, and I hope everybody has found this really useful. Please join us again next month. We're talking about focused deterrence on the 14th of March at 1 o'clock, and we will be sending out the briefing notes from this session early next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Panel members, you can stay in the studio. Bye.
Thank you.